Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm excited to present and to organize this amazing conference. It has been a pleasure. Today I'm going to talk about my paper called Polarized Technologies, which is joint work with Gaia, with Year. And this paper starts from a basic fact. That the mouse is not working. Okay, this paper starts from a fact, that is that people with different party affiliation have very different views on fundamental issues. And in particular here, what we do is to construct three measures of how much the respondents from the CCES surveys are supportive of three topics that are highly polarized in political debate. And the first topic is the environment. And as you can see, even controlling for a lot of characteristics and fixed effects, the views of respondents on environmental issues are highly correlated with the party affiliation. And similarly for abortion rights and weapons. And in particular, you can see that as respondents identify themselves as more Republican, they are less supportive towards the environment, less supportive towards abortion rights, and more supportive towards the use of weapons. And this view, and the fact that views are polarized by political party has been established by the literature. What hasn't been so much established is what are the implications of this divide. However, there has been a recent literature that at the intersection between economics, finance, and political science that has showed how this divide is reflected on individual decisions like consumption, like fertility, and health. What we do in this paper is to show that this divide is reflected in the content and the diffusion of new technologies that are invented and brought to the market. We do so focusing on the United States over the last couple of decades, which is a highly polarized country in a highly politically polarized period. And we do so assembling a novel data set, linking patents and inventors to the party affiliation of inventors. And we analyze how party affiliation shapes the diffusion and the content of new technologies. The paper in a nutshell. So what we find is that inventors patent technologies that are in line with the views of their parties. And in particular, Democrat and Republican inventors are 1/3 differently likely to patent green innovation. And a similar magnitude holds true for female health technologies and weapon technologies. And what we find is that this match is driven by the party affiliation of inventors, as it holds true across inventor and patent economic returns, and it holds true across assignee characteristics, organization characteristics, and within organizations. And lastly, we also show that the diffusion of innovation, that is the flow of knowledge, is politically polarized, and that inventors are 20% differently likely to cite polarized technologies. And this pattern is not just mechanical, but it goes through also when we remove patents outside this technology.
One question about whether you think of technologies as having a fixed sort of political position. So I think about like plastics as a technology that I think for some period of time would have been at least neutral and maybe even sort of like pro-environment in a lot of ways, because they were just, using a byproduct of petroleum refining, and today are viewed really differently. And so I wonder, do you think about those changes at all in your analysis, and how would you think about it in terms of potentially driving behavioral change, sort of on the political side, that you invent a technology and then its political meaning switches or something?
This is very interesting. So in this paper, we do not consider these changes over time in how politicized is each patent, but for the time period, the three topics that we consider are quite stable in how politicized they are. Yeah, that's for sure interesting. Yes, Lucy. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm wondering also, thinking about politics changing over time and where people's political beliefs may be driven apart by motivated reasoning based on the industry that they're in or something like that. Can you see changes in people's political beliefs over time, if it's differential for those who are, gained from being in a certain industry or what?
So the only thing that we see is the party affiliation of inventors, and we have just some snapshot over time, so we can't track that over time. For one state, we have a panel of voters, and so for that state, we can see whether they change affiliation, but in line with the literature in the US, people do not change party affiliation, so there is not much we can do on this, but I agree that could be interesting.
Yeah, I was going to refer to the change in polarization over time as well. And yeah, you maybe, you know, the work by Nicolas Longuet-Marx, which, has some data that you could potentially leverage, I think, in bring to that.
Yeah.
So let's think about it afterwards.
Thank you. Okay, we contribute to three main literatures. The first one is the one I was mentioning that shows that party affiliation and polarizations are reflected in individuals' choices and labor market outcomes. In particular, I think a crowd of economists may be interested by this paper, Jelven, Naidu, and voters that show that the field of research of economists is related to their political orientation. And we contribute to this literature by showing that the views associated with the party of workers are directly linked to their content of their work. The second literature to which we contribute is the one that shows that inventors' demographics matter for the direction of innovation, to which Gaia has contributed with her job market paper that shows that race of scientists matter for the type of scientific production they do. And we contribute to this literature by showing that also the party affiliation of inventors and the view of the party matters for the direction of innovation. And lastly, we contribute to the literature on individuals' networks shaping this flow of knowledge, the diffusion of innovation, by also saying that the party affiliation shapes how technologies get diffused among inventors. So for the rest of the talk, I will go through the data, the main results, the mechanism, what we have on diffusion, and we will discuss and conclude. So to study this question, we assembled a novel data set starting from the universe of patents and inventors data in the US from 2001 to 2023. And we matched this data at inventor level with the voter registration data. How it works in the US is that to vote in any election, local, state, or federal, you have to be registered in order to vote. This means that, for instance, in 2020, 73% of eligible voters were registered to vote. And this figure is probably much higher for people with similar characteristics to inventors, as those who usually do not get registered are people from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, minorities, or uneducated people. And so you should think this figure to be higher for inventors. And upon registration, people can choose whether to be affiliated with a party or to remain unaffiliated. And I will go back to this in the next slide. But this is a snapshot of how the voter data look like. So we have the name of the person, the city of residence, and other information. And we will perform the match on names and city of residence.
What fraction are unaffiliated?
So in our data, between 20 to 27%, depending on the state and the year.
And this is public knowledge, it's your affiliation?
Yeah. So you can look up people in the US and they are affiliated to. We focus on, in particular, on 4 states that are Florida, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. And we do this for 2 main reasons. The first reason is that they matter for total US innovation over the period. And the second reason, and the most important reason, is that they have what's called a closed primary system. What does it mean? That if you want to vote in a given party primaries, you have to be registered under that party. So if you want to vote in the Republican primaries, you have to be registered as a Republican. And so people have incentives to truthfully reveal their party affiliation because primaries in the US are quite important. And we see from the CCS data that indeed the registration with a party in these states is 4 times higher than all the other states. And indeed, that's why we have a low share of unaffiliated voters. And we adopt a matching procedure that is quite conservative to avoid false positives, but we are still able to merge 53% of the patents granted over the period, which is roughly 10% of the total US innovation over the period. We also check that our sample is not a blanket sample of inventors, and we see the matched and unmatched inventors are similar on many dimensions. So we don't see that they are different. And we do the same exercise, but instead of merging the inventor data with the voter data, we merge them with the campaign contribution data. This span the whole US, but of course the fraction of people who donate to a party is much lower. So for each state, we have fewer people, and still we find similar results. The next step is to show that technologies are politically polarized, is to link the technologies to the views of the parties. What we do here is to select topics that are polarized in the public debate.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to ask before, but
Yeah.
it seems like you're looking at this mapping from parties to inventors, rather than saying that, you know, inventors have certain intrinsic value that would be consistent with Gaia's earlier work, and that leads them to do certain things, but it also leads them to register with the political party. Now that would be more credible to me. I understand you cannot observe the values, but
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, we don't know exactly their values. You can think of them to be highly correlated with their party affiliation, but that's why we are more.
Yeah, that's.
We can talk more later.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, maybe you can come as a mechanism so you can refer this, the underlying view you have. So is it the idea that, let's say, I choose to do a PhD in chemistry because I have, you know, chemistry is something that tends to be more to be technologies versus some form of engineering that leads to weapons. So is this about the choice of subjects of what you choose to specialize in? Because otherwise you want to kind of hold it very tightly. So rather than doing green or female health, you want to say, okay, with the same kind of scientific training, here are 2 different things you could do. So you almost want to say, kind of with biochemistry, I could either do X or Y and then condition on that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the second thing that you're mentioning. Of course, there is sorting in each step of the pipeline. So education.
You don't want categories this broad.
Sorry?
We don't want categories this broad because these will capture very different trainings.
But we are, I will show you our empirical strategy, and we are looking at a narrow set of inventors that are very similar in background. I will show you
But then one,
slides.
maybe we can wait for that, but this seems to be.
Because what we are doing here is actually looking at the specific content of their job, conditional on being on a given field. So it's like within labor economics, what do you do?
But I think then you don't want patent abstracts to be so broadly defined.
But we define.
You don't want them so broadly defined. You'd want to say within female health, let's say, what would be kind of maybe a left wing or a right wing or something like that, or within kind of synthetic chemistry, what is green versus non-green. I mean, so this seems like a very broad way of defining abstracts.
Can I show you our empirical strategy, and then we comment on this? Also, these are not too broad in the sense that the means are very low. These technologies like green is like 1%
Maybe it's
so
very low, but the problem is then that you don't have enough data, not that the definition isn't broad.
These are our definition based on a dictionary approach that we use on patent abstract. So we look at specifically keywords that match the intent of inventors to actually do those patents. So it's actually quite specific. And we also do some robustness with non-dictionary measures that are developed by the cooperative patent classification system. Just to make clear, so this is our empirical specification. On the left-hand side, our dependent variable is whether an inventor ever patents one technology, either green or female head or weapon. And we regress it on a Democrat dummy and other dummy. Other includes mostly unaffiliated inventors or inventors affiliated with small parties. Democrat is a dummy for whether you're a Democrat or not. And the omitted party category is Republican. So our beta 1 hat tells us the differential probability between Democrat and Republican to patent a given technology, green, female head, or weapon. And we control for year fixed effect, in which the year in which the patent is granted, county fixed effect. And we also add in our preferred specification, I will show you also results with a female dummy and birth year fixed effect. And importantly, to Rahini's point, we are controlling support section fixed effect. Basically, patents are divided in 9 broad sections. For instance, section F is mechanical engineering. And so we are looking within mechanical engineering, do inventors do more or less of this kind of patents? In robustness check, we narrow down this section fixed effect to class fixed effect, and classes are 110. So we really look within narrow field, so like within labor economics, within development economics. So we try to do this to account exactly to this sort of thing. Yes.
Maybe this is just a restatement of Justin's question here. Democrat is just fundamental in the same way female.
Yeah.
Is that what you want us to think about? It's like a predetermined type. And
so we don't take a stance on this. Because of course, like the party affiliation is shaped by many factors throughout your life. So we are just going to show you these empirical irregularities. And yeah, but we are agnostic on this.
I think it matters for the interpretation. Identification is one thing, but you want to identify something that you can also interpret.
Yeah, of course.
because I work on female heart, I align a certain way.
Sorry?
Because I work on female health.
Yeah, it could be that, but still, the takeaway from our paper is that it comes from the inventor side. But yeah, I agree, it changes the interpretation. We don't know what comes first, but yeah, that's the best we can do.
You could get at that with like, over the 20 years period, the parties, there could be a shock within party on the salience or a position on a certain topic, which you could exploit.
The problem is.
Nicholas' work.
Yeah, yes.
I agree 100%. The problem is that with this shock, you are changing both the supply side, so the inventor side, but also the demand side for technologies. So I don't know if I'm actually doing any progress in identifying something better than this.
So you're saying that because a party changed position, suddenly a certain technology is more demanded and
Yeah,
so
exactly, and then you change labor demand and can come through firms and other mechanisms.
it's going to be structural.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So I had a kind of related question. So when you told us the motivation, I thought that what you're interested in is not that much, the average beta over the time, the whole time period, because that's, of course, there is a difference between, Democrats and Republicans. Those are very different people. They almost certainly do different, betas. The interesting thing would be to see that it's increasing as polarization is increasing. So I thought that you would have a, time-dependent beta and just see how that changes over time.
No, I agree. This is interesting, but we have data limitation on this, so that's why we can't do it. But I agree, it would be interesting for future work.
Some periods Not necessarily every year, but
Yeah,
first half versus second half.
we can try to do something. Thanks. Yes.
Just as a follow-up on the demand side, demand would increase to a similar extent for both Republican and Democratic inventors.
Depends if you have a party-specific shock, it changes just one of the two. That's what Edgar, I think, was.
No, but it's true that, yeah, it's true that technically, if it's just about, if inventors are just opportunistic, then all inventors should be opportunistic. What you want to show is that if actually only one party changes a stance, and people affiliated with this party changes their behaviors, it means there's something else that's just pure opportunism. Otherwise, the Democrats would also adapt when the Republicans do, right? So
I see your point.
Again, even if there might be demand effect, I think because as you see, it's so much of a topic of contention, it would be interesting to see descriptives on that.
Okay, I see your point, thanks. Okay, let me show you the results. So what we find is that Democrats compared to Republicans are way more likely to do green technologies, and the magnitudes are quite large. And in particular, after the fixed effect, so even within narrow fields, Democrats are 31% more likely than Republicans to do green technologies. And similar magnitudes hold for female technologies and weapon technologies, but reversed. So Republicans are more likely to do weapon-related technologies. We do a bunch of robustness check. One thing that I wanted to point out, since it came out in the discussion before, is that we also control for CPC classes, and there are 129 CPC classes. So even within narrow fields, we still have this matching between inventors' party affiliation and the type of technologies. We also do robustness checks with alternative samples, and in particular, we see that we have similar results using the campaign contribution data that span the whole United States. Okay, but what drives this match between inventors and the technologies? What we investigate here are two different channels. The first one is the role of returns. And what we see is that inventors, the match between the inventors' party affiliation and the technology persists across low returns, low and high economic returns, which means that inventors' quality is not really driving this match. And the second thing that we investigate is the role of organization. And we see that the match persists across organization characteristics and within organization. And this hints to the fact that this sorting comes from inventors sorting into technologies rather than sorting into organizations. Okay, let me. Yeah.
What does that really mean by sorting? Like, there's one way that people often say that identity characteristics affect what you work on. Is that what you mean by sorting the technology?
Yeah. The fact that they do things that are in line with the views of their party.
Could you control, for example, could you take everybody who did engineering, say, and then see whether, because otherwise you could be doing health training, and then you could need to control a lot of the background of the people.
So the background of inventors is quite homogeneous, and we controlling for a section fixed effect. What I was saying before is like looking at inventors within the same area of expertise and research interest. So like section F is mechanical engineering. It's hard to do a mechanical engineering related patent if you have a completely different.
Not very broad.
Yeah.
Issue. So I think.
But then we narrow it down even more, but that's the best way.
Where we have a lot of work, but I don't know if there's a way, at least even for a subset to get, either when people file patents, they often have to file things like their own history of patents or things they've done or equivalent of their CV. So even for a subset, if you're going to show us, what that looks like.
We can do more work on these things.
But and maybe this is a question similar to what's been asked. I'm trying to think about, there's a literature, for instance, on both gender and race about how that matters for what people work on.
Yeah.
Is this different from that, or is that just kind of thinking of another characteristic?
That's a great question. So first of all, party affiliation should be less observable than gender and race. So you shut down the discrimination side of things.
The gender and race are also predetermined.
Yeah, no, that's kind of a
Yeah, exactly. And this is more of a choice that depends on all your life experience in
It's
it.
more like people would say, like, if it comes to, gender, that, you notice different things, and therefore you work on different things, because if you, I don't know, design seat belts, you would design them differently.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand here what the underlying idea is. It's the idea that I have some party affiliation, and is it that it exposes me to certain kind of evidence base that drives what I try to work on? Is it just about values, as Torsten said?
So yeah, it's a bit of both, but how I think about it is that while gender and race are pretty stable for a person, party affiliation, the fact that for you environment has become salient, this is something that varies over time, can become more or less salient depending on the political supply side. So it's a bit of a more complex notion in a sense than the other measure. But yeah, that's a bit of how we interpret this thing. And it depends on multiple factors that shaped your life and what your experience is. And it's a bit more endogenous.
Do you have to say your political affiliation every time you go?
So you have to confirm it, but then we have the registration date, that is the last time
So some
you
people
updated.
Please,
Very few people switch in the US. Also,
how far back can you go, like?
that depends on when you switch, where you move.
Because you might imagine younger people are more Democrat, older people are Republican, so it'd be interesting as an inventor. Which is, I mean, I don't know,
We can look.
or even away from other to unaffiliated.
Yeah, we can have a look into this.
One way to do it would be to look at different ages of investment
Yeah.
rights and when they registered, as Robin was saying.
So we tried to do a bit of work on birth board, but we don't find anything meaningful on this. But yeah, try. But it doesn't seem that like those who were born under Reagan are more Republican than others from our data.
But I mean, once it's somehow has a bearing on this, whether it's values or infusion from your political political supply side. So under if it's only values that you formed when you were registering for the first time, which is when you're 18 or 20, then that's one interpretation. And another one is if you take on this time-varying emphasis on politics by Republicans and Democrats, and it would be good to separate out the two for several reasons. And there would be a diagnostic for that you could construct based on those cohorts and how long.
Yeah, no, I agree. Would be interesting to do more. Let me push on a bit. So okay, so I just show you quickly the returns part. What we do here is to proxy economic returns with citation, which is standard in the innovation literature, and because as citation measure the economic and social impact of a patent as well as inventors' income. And we see that our results are pretty stable across the two measures that we use for returns. And we do a similar exercise for organization, and in particular, we look at assignees who are the owners of the royalty of a patent and who are the employers of the inventors. And we add, first of all, assignee fixed effect, and in particular, the coefficient for green remains stable. Of course, the exercise is a bit demanding because we drop 60% of our assignee, and technologies like female health are done in small assignees, so they just get dropped out of the sample. But still, even within firms, we still find the same match. And lastly, we split the sample among those assignees that are private and those that are academic. And we see that the match persists even for academic organization. Of course, it's a bit noisier. Instead of having 95,000 observations, we have 8,600. So it's a big drop, but still it's there, even for inventors who have more discretion on what to do as research. Okay, let me just show you quickly the results on diffusion. Here, so far what we found is that the party affiliation of inventors matter for the content of technologies. But we ask whether this also matters for the diffusion of technologies. How do we track diffusion? With forward citation, because citation tracks the flow of knowledge in the profession. We run the same regression as before, but here, now the left-hand side is the probability that they ever cite a given technology, so green, female, or weapon. And we find similar magnitudes, and in particular, the Democrats are 20%, around almost 20% more likely to cite green patents compared to Republicans, and similarly for female health, and reversed for weapons. And this holds true not just mechanically, not just because they do those patents, but even in the case in which the citing patent is not green, we still find that there is this gap. Okay, let me jump to the discussion because I think that's what we talk most throughout this presentation. So this paper shows the importance of inventor-level decision in shaping innovation besides the product and labor demand factors. But why do inventors do this? One hypothesis could be that inventors have differential information or differential beliefs on the returns of technology. And this is in line with the evidence that beliefs are polarized by political party. Or it could be Thorsten's story on intrinsic motivation. So it could be that they derive utility from patenting technologies that are in line with their views, and their views are close to their party's views. Or it could be also that intrinsic motivation comes from some social image concern, like benability law. And lastly, it could be, as Alan was mentioning before, it could be that the childhood environment matters, and childhood environment shapes both your party affiliation and the technology that you want to do independently. But regardless of the channel, we still find that inventor-level decision matter, which is something new in the innovation literature. But then we want to point out to what are the possible, yes, sir.
And I was just thinking one kind of interpretation. Can you go back to the graph you had with the main results?
Which one?
Your main results say, yeah, sorry, no.
This one on diffusion.
Yeah, so something like this. So I just want to make sure I understand the main result you're saying. So this is saying that if I look at green technologies, this is the difference between
Democrats and Republicans in citing green technologies.
and what is the gray bar? That is all
The dark gray is when we exclude when the citing inventors does green patents, because otherwise it would be a bit mechanical.
So this one being in the case, let's say we're controlling for only in the category of, let's say, mechanical engineering. Is a different way, like what are the non-green technologies? How do we know the difference is not coming from that? Right? I mean, is it, what are non-green mechanical engineering technologies? Like you're putting a lot of emphasis on, let's say, green technology, like here on kind of female health. Let's say female health is in the category of like molecular biology.
Yeah.
Like, should I think about this is more on female health relative to what, like male health, to everything else in molecular biology? Because it feels like, you're emphasizing something, but it's relative to a lot else, and we need to know what that other else is.
No, of course, yeah. The result, you should think the results on female health, like within health categories.
Yes, what is the non-female health?
There are technologies also towards men, depends on the classification.
Yeah, but then why would you, so suppose I say female health relative to child health. What is the model we have that say that Republicans will do more child health and Democrats will do more female health in let's say in the categories you have?
I mean, for how we did this is that we started from the data in the sense that we looked at what is polarized in the public debate.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, we can talk about it later.
Yeah.
I think that was initially saying, you're saying this is, you're working more on X relative to Y.
Yeah,
But Y is very poorly defined, and Y is everything else. And that, I think, makes it hard to interpret it along these mechanisms you're talking about.
okay, yeah, we can do more, I understand, we can do more, yes.
I have one question. There is one more exercise you can do. You can control for whether green female has or weapon patent you are citing, and look at whether you cite that more or less if the person who did it was a Democrat and a Republican.
Sorry, can you repeat the first
So
part?
keep fixed whether it's a green female has or weapon
Okay, yeah.
patent. And do you cite them more often if it's done by a Republican or a Democrat? The reason why it would be interesting is that maybe what's going on is that I'm just, citing things which are done by people
Yeah.
more like me. And that explains why people are doing more, so it's just two different networks.
Yeah. So we have this
yeah.
in the appendix, and we indeed find that Democrats tend to cite more Democrats, Republicans tend to cite.
Even keeping fixed the type, right?
I think with the same specification as before. Yeah, I think it's not in the paper, but we restricted to within patent, and we found that, but we didn't put it in the paper, but we can do it.
Because that would be a different explanation that I just.
Yeah, no, it's part of the story for sure. The fact that there is this homophily between Democrats citing Democrat, that's part of the story.
He cites more papers from Berkeley than for sure.
It's not because they're Democrat, it's because I know them.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Okay, let me just go through the potential implication on this. So what we find is that there is party-based sorting and less diffusion based on party lines. But this could have implication for innovation and growth, because this means having fewer interaction between people with a diverse background, but diversity has been found to be helpful for the flow of new ideas, which is what matters for innovation. And also, it has been found that workplaces where there is a mix between Democrats and Republicans, they are more productive. And so what we think is that this may have implication for innovation and growth, leading to fewer new ideas and less productivity. So let me just conclude. So what we do is to look at US inventors matched with the voter registration data, and we focus on politically polarized issues. And we find that Democrats and Republicans inventors patent technologies based on their party affiliation. And we uncover a new margin through which political polarization can reflect in the economy. And this could have potential implication for innovation and growth, which is still an open question for research. Thank you so much.